welcome back to the podcast.
So excited to be back. Thank you for having me.
So I think we talked about it off air. The first time we had you on was 2019, probably like in the fall.
Yeah.
Lots changed in the business. You have quite a few new businesses. Businesses have expanded their offerings. Would you like to introduce yourself, though, and we'll kind of get started there?
Yeah, I'm Rick Holtz. I'm owner of Holtz Leather Company, Holtz Headwear, and our new startup board and log company.
Yeah. So I think to set up the story, even though so in the first time we had you on, we talked primarily all about Holtz Leather, how it was started, the initial sort of thought behind that. Let's highlight a little bit of that, just kind of set the story up for Board and Log and Holtz Headwear, because I think that kind of sets the platform and the groundwork for what we see today.
Sure. We started Holtz Leather really after losing everything. So I've been self-employed since I was a boy. Went through a 6-year just fight against myself and my pride by losing everything, and then we came out of that and we started Holtz Leather really out of our basement, and it exploded out of the gate and just had really good success with that business for the next 6 years. Just phenomenal growth.
So around what year did you end up starting Holtz Leather in your basement?
2014.
2014.
That's right.
And so
2014.
it obviously exploded over the first few years. I know you did some wedding stuff too. It had like its own little like separate entity and business that you were doing at the same time. The Holtz Leather we see today on Meridian and the location that you have and the experience that you've kind of created there as of now of 2024. When did you first get that location for Holtz Leather, and were you looking at other locations to kind of plant roots, or did you have any desire to even have a retail store?
Actually, we didn't have any desire for a retail store. We were e-commerce based, and we're doing very well with e-commerce. E-commerce is really more of my background. And had a buddy of mine, Jason Butler, who owns Preservation Company, stopped me one day and he's like, "Hey, I've got this building that I'm thinking about purchasing and totally redoing." And he took us to the building and he showed it to me, and I was like, "Man, this thing looks like a heap."
Yeah, this is going to take a lot of work, but okay. If you say so.
Yeah, it was pretty rough, and he has incredible vision, and he really transformed the building and allowed us the opportunity to. We actually put our production in the upstairs when we first started, and then we had our marketing offices on the 3rd floor, and then our retail in the bottom floor. And since that time, we've expanded to where the top and bottom floors are now retail space, and the retail's been phenomenal for us in Huntsville.
Yeah. And I mean, it's crazy to think about, that at that time, seeing the space that is Holtz Leather and seeing Meridian Street, not even at that point, you probably couldn't even have imagined what it is today, and all the hustle and bustle that's there with the things that have been redone at Lincoln Mill, and all the sort of the initiatives that downtown Huntsville has to connect really the hub of downtown Huntsville to Meridian Street. I bet the over the last few years, probably since COVID, have you seen an uptick as far as retail foot traffic and just people coming in to visit Holtz Leather that maybe haven't ever been there before?
Oh, absolutely. We've seen since COVID, our retail business has exploded. In fact, we've done more on our retail side and growth than we have online, which has been phenomenal for us. Yeah, so Huntsville is definitely growing. It did not hurt having Latoile come right between Preservation and
everyone
Holtz.
loves a pastry.
Oh man, and that food traffic just brings a whole new demographic and a whole new people into our little shopping community over there. And it is a hot spot in Huntsville. Like, it is just truly a unique spot. It is just like this one little spot where 3 stores really sit. Of course, we have the mill over there as well, and they bring their own line of traffic well. But it's just becoming a really unique place in Huntsville to shop.
Yeah, I remember when Latoile opened, friends of mine opened it, and I do them very well. And so when they opened, it was always just like, I'm so excited for them to actually be there. My office is at Lincoln Mill. Being able to walk there and have a coffee or a pastry, it's like I can justify walking to have a chocolate croissant because I walked there. Like I deserve it. But it's one of those things. It's incredible just to see the people that are in that area of Huntsville, that some of them have lived there in Huntsville their entire life, but have never been down on that stretch.
Right.
And it's really, I mean, it's supported too by like the Salt Smokehouse that just opened down the.
We've actually been there, so it's very good.
Very good food, and then you have Turbo Coffee right there too. So that whole area has just blossomed into what it is today. But I know you talked a little bit about the expansion of the retail spot within your Meridian location. Talk a little bit about some of the other offerings that you've in the last few years have kind of gotten into, such as just pottery and all the other stuff, the candle bar that has kind of expanded your retail offerings.
Yeah. So we started a candle bar in our upstairs. So we ended up outgrowing the upstairs for production. Just didn't have the room for all the people that we had for making our leather goods. So we shifted them to a different location, and we decided to incorporate a pottery studio / candle bar up there. So we started out really making all of the vessels for our candle bar. So candle bars, in essence, you can come in and you can pick a vessel and you can mix your fragrances and your scents and you pour your own wax. It's just a real experiential retail experience, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing it. All my family enjoys doing it. So we've always kind of built our business around things that, well, I won't say always, but we try to build our business around things that we as a family and our family enjoy. And that's something that we always love doing. And so it just blossomed out. And that's also been a really big growth spot for our business as well.
Yeah. Because I mean, I think if you enjoy it yourself, you're more likely to put the time and effort needed to grow it.
Yeah.
And if you don't really enjoy what you're doing or enjoy an element of the business, it's kind of like, well, it makes it hard to sell it, even if it's a good profitable thing, or it's good response from the community, or whatever it might be, whatever metric you're judging the result of that new thing. If you don't enjoy it, it just diminishes no matter how good the results are. You're like, well, I don't really enjoy making this, or I don't really enjoy doing this. But having something that gives you feedback, that's good feedback, and that you also enjoy doing. Because I guess in 2021, when I was an intern there, y'all were doing candles, but the candle bar still was kind of in that, like, I guess in the growth spot where I was kind of thinking about maybe we should do something to make it more of an experience. But now able to offer it for bachelorette parties, for I've seen the amount of posts that y'all have lately about just all the different sort of special events that you can do candle making to, which I think is such a unique thing, and there's nothing really like it.
Yeah, we do team building for companies and that type of thing as well. So it's like it's been very good for that. However, I do want to say that we have 11 children, and so we're raising our kids. And as we're raising our kids, I'm teaching them that you can't always do the things that you're passionate about. Like sometimes, like when we first started Holtz, we actually started as an embroidery company. Okay. And we started out on Etsy. That was the first platform we started on. And I remember when we were first starting, it's like, I view myself as kind of a masculine guy. So embroidering bridal robes was
very
not
delicate.
Yeah, it's like that was not my this is my dream job.
For sure.
But it was making good money, and I knew that I could take the money that we were making, and eventually I'd be able to roll that money over and to do something that I truly enjoy and am very passionate about. So I think there are times within our life that we have to remember that sometimes we got to do the things that we don't like doing to get to the places where we want to be.
For sure. And I think, if it's a job you have, an entry-level job at a position you don't necessarily love, or a company you don't love, that expertise and that knowledge allows you to kind of pivot in a direction that's more suitable for maybe things you do like, and maybe more suitable for your skill set. Yeah. Like you said, embroidery wasn't necessarily something you loved doing, but it allowed you to kind of step into maybe leather, and maybe step into woodworking, and step into all these other things that allows you to, drive your passion, but this other thing that's maybe not your passion is helping drive revenue, which is very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
It allows everyone to have a good night's sleep. It allows everyone to kind of go to work and at least feel like at the end of the day I'm going to get paid. And so that is it's definitely a balancing act for sure. So talk a little bit about how Holtz Headwear kind of came about, and the different maybe ways in which you do Holtz Headwear that maybe is unique or maybe people don't know about.
So we were the first company that came out with a custom leather patch hat, and it came kind of by a customer request. Customer reached out to us and like, hey, is there any chance you could put a logo on a leather patch and then stitch it to a hat? And we had a stitching manager at the time that I remember throwing him a patch and said, hey, see if you can stitch this on a hat. And man, within a minute and a half later, he handed me the hat back, and I was like,
this is something.
This is something that's going to be big. Yeah. And so we ended up taking a picture that's actually in this building up against the blue wall behind me. And we, it used to be blue. It's not blue anymore. But anyways, we took a picture. We put it up on Facebook, and it was like fire. We were selling hats like crazy. I mean, from the word go, and it became a third of our total revenue for our company.
Wow. And around what year was this?
This was, I want to say it was before COVID? I don't remember the
I remember
exact
doing
year.
hats.
It was
I remember
before
doing
COVID.
hats. I remember doing hats with y'all there. As
So it
an
had to be in
intern.
2018.
Yeah,
it was
so,
it was
okay.
pretty early. I think we were 6 years now into doing the hats.
And the hats have kind of grown with not just even custom orders that
Mhm.
like a company says, hey, I want to do this for my employees, or I want to do this for a team that I'm on or whatever. It's also gotten into getting vintage patch hats too. Or you've kind of
that's
dabbled in
fun.
that. Talk a little bit about how that kind of came about, and then how kind of that, from that initial minute and a half stitch of a hat, kind of this has blossomed into iterations and iterations of offering new and unique ways to have leather on a hat.
Yeah. So, something we always like at Holtz is we love all things vintage Americana. That's very big a part of our brand. If you come into our store, you should pick up on that pretty quickly, and heritage. And so we got into this idea of buying up vintage patches, like patches from like the 70s and maybe even some from the 80s. And then we brought those patches in and then incorporated them into hats, and we sell those inside of our retail store. And another, I mean, it wasn't booming business, but we've been able to sell some hats that way.
And then you've done some of the vintage patches on other leather products too.
That's correct.
Like some of your journals and notebooks that y'all have, you've had the stitching of leather patches, like vintage leather, like Coca-Cola things or
NASA.
Ford or NASA or whatever it might be. It's such a unique thing, and it's interesting just how from the initial stitching of a leather that you're like, oh, I think this might be able to work, to then now what it is and the success it's had. It's crazy to think about. So in I guess it's been almost a year, or it's been a little over a year. In June of 2023, Board and Log kind of blossomed. It opened up its doors. It became your newest venture. Talk a little bit about the months leading up to it and the process and sort of the thought behind what this concept was going to do and the need it would fill.
Yeah. So the idea was in 2020, lumber cost hit a kind of a record. It put a lot of pressure on our cost of goods. So our ability to produce our wood products. In fact, at some point, we even discontinued most of our wood products because of the cost of lumber just got too expensive.
Wow.
So we were, at that time, we were producing a lot of cutting boards, butcher blocks, those type of things that we would sell within our store and online, personalize those. And then, the cost of walnut went from $10 a board foot to $20 a board foot to $25 a board foot. And I was like, you know what? I think we could figure out how to do this. And it took us 3 years to figure out the process, because it is a much higher barrier to entry. It is much more difficult because you've got to be able to, we wanted to do all steps. So we wanted to find the logs. We wanted to mill the logs, dry the lumber, finish the lumber, so that the process of actually planing it, ripping it, and then getting it ready as a final good. And the main idea was that we would use it in the production of our own products for Holtz, so it would save us that cost of goods. And then we kind of had a building that was sitting empty, which is the building we're in right now. I own the building, but it just wasn't getting much use. But it was like, well, what can we do? It's like, well, let's open a lumber store inside of the building. And so we opened in June of 2023 after we had started producing some lumber. And we have learned a lot, a lot of headaches, a lot of setbacks. This is probably one of my, I would say, one of my most difficult startups I've ever gone through. In fact, it almost made me not want to do any startups anymore.
I'll just stick with the other two.
I told my wife, I was like, I'm done doing startups. This one is about taking it out of me. Yeah. But a year later, really starting to see it blossom and seeing a lot of the fruit come from it. And now I'm starting to get very excited about it. But so, it was hard.
Like that was he said it's a 3-year journey to kind of figure out all the steps. How long was the journey? The same length for actually doing the wood cutting and doing what we see today, or does that start like a year or so before you open the doors?
Yeah, so that's definitely the cutting. So we bought our mill probably right after COVID. We bought the mill, so it took us 3 years, just the process of cutting and drying and learning, because there's so much scrap. Like we had to throw away so much stuff because it's like you cut it and it's like
it didn't cut right, or you didn't really know what you were, like,
we didn't really know what we were doing, and so we watched a lot of YouTube videos and really started teaching ourselves the process. And I'm doing this with my boys, so this is a big deal for, if you don't know much about Holtz, it's like we're very family focused, family oriented. I want to build heritage into my children, teaching them the value of hard work. So this is something my boys and we did together. Like, we traveled up to Indiana to buy our wood mill from Wood Miser. We got the training there. My boys were running the saw when we were there. We came back. We were clearing a field up on our land, and we had all these oak trees. And instead of sending them to be burned, it's like, well, let's mill these things and try to see if we can turn it into some lumber. And we did that, and we learned how to dry, and we learned how not to dry lumber, because you don't dry it right, it'll twist on you, and it'll do all kinds of bad stuff that makes
probably
your
more
product
things.
work.
You probably learn more of things not to do than things to do.
Absolutely.
I feel like that's often the not necessarily the secret sauce of an entrepreneur, but the secret sauce, is that not necessarily to tell someone what they should do to be successful, but tell you the things that you should not do to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at it that way, you're able to because like every business is a little different, but I think in general, the things that are mistakes in businesses are probably unanimous across the board, depending on like the actual service you're providing. Like, obviously, I don't cut wood and own a mill, but the business steps of opening and operating multiple businesses and the business side of being a business owner is unanimous. Yeah. And so I think that's often the approach that should be taken. So the space we're sitting in right now, off of 72, and the mill and everything, all production is done here in house, correct?
That's primarily, most of it is done here. So we actually do the milling here. So the logs come to this building. We pull them into the building. We have a little window where you can actually watch the guys cutting the logs, and they'll be back there cutting, and you can be shopping or get you a cup of coffee and hang out. And this is really meant to be more community focused. So it's really about bringing people who have a passion about woodworking in and talking about their projects and what they're doing. Is really meant to be community focused. And so my boys work in the retail, and they love being here, especially on Saturdays, because Saturdays it's like all the old timers come in and they want to tell you all the stories. And of course, they want to tell all the stories to the young boys. So there's this element of this knowledge that's coming from these old timers passing on to the younger generation, and I absolutely love that. That is what I think in our fast-paced culture today that we're just so missing, is that, calling grandma to get the recipes. Like, we don't do that anymore. We get on Pinterest and we pull the recipe down. It's like, so bringing that connection back of that younger generation to the older generation. And we'll sit around here and we'll talk for hours to some of these old timers, and they'll tell us stories about when they were working on the rocket in NASA. Wow. And they, it's interesting how many engineers love woodworking. We've found that it's like a way for them to decompress from work. They come home from engineering, and it just turns their mind into a different direction.
They're just able to sit down and build a project, or just cut a piece of wood. And I think over the year of operation here, is most of your clientele doing projects like just coming in to get stuff that they're doing for their own home, or do you have sort of a segment of the business that is more of a custom need to order thing that allows them to say, hey, a business is building a new office and they want to add this wood mantle, they want to add this? Do you have any of that at the moment, or is most of it just consumers coming in that are interested in have a passion for woodworking?
Actually, we have both. And so we have an online business to where we can cut and ship wood directly to you no matter where you are in the country. Wow. We ship all over the country. So, and what's kind of nice is that if you have a piece of wood and you only need it to be 54.5 inches by 3.5 inches, we'll actually cut that board all the way down to the size of what you need specifically. And so, and you only pay for what you get. So you're not paying for an 8-foot long board and then wasting half of it because you only need half of it. So we ship to you what you want. So we do have both. And then we have the wood shop guy that has his wood shop in his garage, and he comes in and buys wood for his projects that he's working on. So a lot of DIYers. But then we also work with cabinet shops or guys that are building houses. So your construction guy that's going to put a mantle
home or whatever.
Right.
Yes.
And so we sell mantles and beams and those type of things as well.
Okay. So I mean, you've opened 3 successful businesses, from leather to headwear to wood. Three different, three. Not necessarily stretches, but 3 completely different industries. From those 3, and just your expertise and your knowledge of opening and starting a business from scratch, is there something that you can see unanimous across the board? Either a mindset, either anything that you can see, or you would give advice to somebody that you've seen from the 3 different businesses that has helped you be successful?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the foundational things of any business that you start, and that you want to make sure that one, you're offering a very high quality product, that you're putting a product out there that you would yourself want,
Yeah.
and that you would yourself enjoy. And then it's also that customer experience, that the customer is always right, and you want to make sure when they walk in that door that they feel like they're getting the highest level of hospitality. And when you do that, then you start to see them walk back into your doors and back into your doors. But if you do the opposite and you do something that you don't listen to them, or you don't care, then they're going to walk out and they're going to tell their friends how they didn't get a good experience, and that's going to lead to failure quickly.
Yeah.
And so I think focusing on the customer experience and customer service has got to be at the top of the thing. I mean, it's got to be at the top, is really making sure that they're getting a greater value than they pay for.
Yeah. Because I think at the end of the day, I mean, for in the industry, like you mentioned, it's they're not necessarily paying for the service they get. They're not that's not specifically paying for the product, that piece of leather or that piece of wood. It's paying for the experience and the value that it provides them, and making sure that the experience of purchasing that, the experience of coming into the retail shop, the experience, the customer service, the interactions is top tier. Is unanimous across the board. I see it in the work I do. I see it in the work many other small business owners that I know do, that are in completely different realms of business than I am, or that I maybe want to be. But I think there's definitely some unanimous customer service, and just that attention to detail and that attention to the experience that goes a long way. So I know around the same time, potentially, that you opened up this place. You even opened up a retail spot in Madison.
That's right.
To kind of be able to service that retail demand that you were seeing. How has that expansion to Madison kind of grown just the local awareness of Holtz Leather?
Sure. It's been interesting because my daughter and my son-in-law actually ran that store for a while here recently, and they were talking about all the customers that were coming in from Madison that they really had never heard of Holtz and didn't even know.
Didn't know it was even in this in the city.
Yeah.
Didn't even know that y'all exist. Yeah,
that's right.
That's
and
crazy.
So that to me blew my mind. I was like, okay. And I've always, the reason we put the store there is because there tends to be this invisible barrier between Huntsville and Madison.
For sure.
And I don't understand it, but there is. There's like, if you live in Madison, you rarely come to Huntsville. And if you live in Huntsville, you rarely go to Madison.
Yep.
It's just the way it is. Huntsville people hate Madison traffic. Madison people, for whatever reason. But I'm just speaking. I do not love Madison traffic.
I don't either.
I will tell you right now.
I am probably on that group of people that live in Huntsville and don't ever go to Madison. And I would rather drive to Birmingham than drive to Madison. That's kind of where I am. And I have it is such my favorite coffee cup is a coffee cup from Gold Sprint that says Madison is not Huntsville. And it is my favorite coffee cup. I drink out of it almost every morning at home.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it is that weird dynamic that it's just like that it's like it's not talked about by Madison people that why they don't go to Huntsville. They really don't understand why they don't go to Huntsville.
Right.
And Huntsville people will talk about it, but they don't really know why.
Yeah.
And so I guess opening that location kind of allowed you to bridge that gap between people. And Madison is, growing like crazy, the amount of people out there. So I would assume that initial traffic of seeing the retail shop has probably even trickled over into the online sales.
Oh,
too.
absolutely, yeah. It's really interesting how many of our sales online are local, and they'll just do local retail store pickup, and so they'll buy online, and then we'll call them when it's ready, and they swing in and pick it up. So yeah, absolutely, we see a lot of that trickle over.
So as we're sitting here halfway through 2024, what are some future plans, projects you're hoping to do with Holtz Leather, Holtz Headwear, Board and Log in the next year or in the next couple of years? So
Holtz Leather, we're currently talking about expanding through. Well, so we've gone back and forth. Like I wanted for a long time to open a lot more retail stores, like Holtz stores. Like we looked at Franklin, we've looked at Chattanooga. We came real close to having a spot downtown Franklin, and a couple times actually. And both times at the very end, we kind of pulled back just because of resources. It's just opening lots of stores really starts to stretch you. And so this year we're considering, we haven't made a final decision on it, but we're considering expanding into a wholesale business. In fact, we dabbled in it a little last year. At the end of last year, we went to a wholesale market. We just want to see what kind of experience we would have with it. And it was actually really good. In fact, we ended up getting in the Smithsonian. So all of our products are in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., which was a great a great land. I mean, we landed that
Yeah.
contract from that experience, and so I think we will probably steer more into doing wholesale and growing our business through wholesale, so supplying other retail stores with our products.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, like, and I would envision that's like we talked a little bit about off air, some things that I'm working on, but being able to service so many people all across the world in more of a, or all across the country in more of a personalized manner for that individual wholesale client.
Sure.
And I think it'd be incredible to see how that continues to grow and how that continues to bring success for Holtz Leather. But I appreciate you taking the last little bit talking about Holtz Leather, Holtz Headwear, and Board and Log. We'll have all the episode and the information for all the businesses in the episode notes. But I appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.